Well, hi, I'm John Hart, and welcome back to Mr. America Hart. Today I'm talking to you about the most influential bodybuilders of all time. This is one of the subjects that covered quite a bit when I was on Rick Drazen's show back in the day when Rick was still around. He had a heavy leaning towards the golden era. Everything Arnold, basically, in his view. Everything Arnold was the best. Everything they did was the best. I love him, but I disagree with a lot of that was discussed on his end and believed on his end. So I will share with you my top 5 bodybuilders. This is of all time, across the board, the most influential that affected generations, that affected either the training of people, affected the mindset of people towards bodybuilding, affected the popularity of bodybuilding, all of it. To some degree, each one of them had an effect. And I'm going to start off right now by saying that Mike Mentzer at number 5. I have him at number 5 specifically because he affected a generation when we were at a time where a lot of the bodybuilders, golden era bodybuilders, Pumping Iron was out, the movie. The popularity of bodybuilding was just on the rise between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Ferrigno. And the real deal at the time was that training was assumed to be something that we all had to do 6 days a week. It was assumed that you had to put in 2 to 4 hours a day of workouts. The more the better. That's really what it came down to, was the more the better. Anytime you saw an interview with Arnold or with Franco or any of the guys at the time, the most popular bodybuilders of that era, there was a more is better type attitude. Mike Mentzer brought along a 3-day-a-week workout. Basically, he was one of the people who was promoting Nautilus machines, Nautilus training, all of the ideas of Arthur Jones at the time. And within that realm, he changed the course of a lot of bodybuilders, young bodybuilders, minds, careers, myself included. I was blessed enough to come across his material before I ever picked up a barbell. So my first workouts were Mike Mentzer heavy-duty style workouts, and that's what carried me through as a beginner. A lot of people didn't have that advantage. But they did get to backtrack and get to go and train that way and reap the benefits of that training. Basically, Mike Mentzer had influenced a generation to train less, a lot less, with much greater intensity. So giving a lot more during a set, doing a lot less overall, and those type of workouts brought on new muscle on a lot of people. So I have Mike Mentzer as my number 5. Now, this list starts to get there kind of quick, okay? So I'm going to name my number 4 right now for a different reason, Frank Zane. Frank Zane was a 3-time Mr. Olympia from 1977, 1978, 1979. The man had a beautiful, beautiful physique with little baby hips like this, little tiny waist and baby hips. He looked like he had girl hips, on a man's physique. It was just tiny, tiny hips. An amazing structure. And he knew how to diet. And at the time, for various reasons, they called him, the chemist. He used to run around taking quite a bit of supplements. The ones that we knew of course, were the vitamin mineral types, and he would share, a lot on his vitamin minerals. Now, why is Frank Zane important? Frank Zane is important because up until that point, the entire 70s, from 1970 straight through 1977 when Frank Zane won Mr. Olympia, the entire generation of bodybuilders, they were all gearing towards mass, bigger, bigger, bigger. Arnold was king for most of that decade. Ferrigno was on the scene. He became the Incredible Hulk on TV. Very popular figures, and they were all massive. So all of a sudden, here comes along this guy, 185 pounds. 185 pounds, and he wipes out all the other Mr. Olympia contenders. Pretty amazing. Small framed guy absolutely went and turned everything on its head. All of a sudden, the standard of the day was aesthetics. We saw our first Mr. Olympia with beautiful, beautiful lines, aesthetics, beautiful posing, and he influenced the course, again, of many people's direction in bodybuilding to focus more on shape, symmetry, being in condition, over purely size. No longer was it size matters. No longer was it size is all there is. No longer. Okay, so that was number 4. My number 3, Lou Ferrigno. Lou Ferrigno brought bodybuilding to weekend TV, Friday nights, primetime TV. Lou Ferrigno, the Incredible Hulk TV series, and with Bill Bixby as the star of the show. This was a popular series. It ran for several years, and with a great actor in the form of Bill Bixby. Lou had several varying roles over the course of the entire series, non-speaking and then speaking at various times. Very entertaining show. All of a sudden, you got to see the biggest bodybuilder on the planet, Lou Ferrigno, on the big screen every single week. And it was amazing. Lou got up there and he just most musculared the heck out of the screen week after week after week. And again, brought bodybuilding to the mainstream. Just increased the awareness just by his presence on that screen. And so Lou would be my number 3. And of course, he's gone on to have a really nice career in acting, various movies, as well as TV shows. So I give Lou number 3. At number 2, now we're getting down there now, right? We're getting down there. These are my top 5 most influential bodybuilders who influenced generations, that influenced large numbers of people. And by the way, let me just be clear on this one. I'm naming IFBB professional bodybuilders here. Yes, I'm naming known steroid users. Yes. The reality that stands is these are the guys who have had the biggest publicity worldwide. And it does not matter to me whether they use or did not use. You may stand in judgment of them because of such things, but that does not matter to me. The subject matter here is most influential bodybuilders of all time. And now we're down to number 2. At number 2, I have Dorian Yates. Yep, I have Dorian Yates. 6-time Mr. Olympia, Dorian Yates. Thus far, by the way, we've only had one Mr. Olympia. That was Frank Zane, 3-time Mr. Olympia. But Mike Mentzer at number 5, Frank Zane at number 4, Lou Ferrigno at number 3. Lou Ferrigno never won the Mr. Olympia, ever. At number 2, 6-time Mr. Olympia, Dorian Yates. Now, how did he influence generations or a generation and training and diet, everything? This was the first Mr. Olympia to come along that, we had bodybuilders all the way from Arnold to Franco to Frank Zane. We had bodybuilders. Chris Dickerson won the Mr. Olympia in there. Samir Banu won the Mr. Olympia in there. Samir did train in a higher intensity fashion. However, he was only there for 1 year. And then, boom, Lee Haney hits the scene. Lee Haney was there for 8 straight years, training traditional bodybuilding style. 3 on, 1 off. And he trained, with a decent amount of volume, sets, and reps. However, Dorian comes along right after Lee Haney. And kaboom, we have our first Mr. Olympia, who espoused, who promoted high-intensity training, specifically high-intensity training. He was training 4 days a week. The top bodybuilder in the world, the biggest bodybuilder at that time. He was a walking dinosaur on stage, ripped, peeled, bar none, inarguable. stepped up on stage, and he was training a quarter of the time of his contemporaries. And he was massive beyond measure. They chased him for 6 straight years, and he was in condition. And he built his body training with 1 to 2 sets throughout his career. It varied and was whittled down to 1 set. So let's be clear. It started off with 2 sets of body part, an exercise, 2 sets an exercise, and then down to 1 eventually, with multiple sets per body part. But still, training single set, high intensity fashion, very high intensity, and only 4 days a week. Dorian Yates influenced a ton of people, their training, their view on diet. He ate carbohydrates. This was the first Mr. Olympia that was regularly taking in carbohydrates. Well, Lee Haney did to an extent too. But Dorian, the majority of his calories throughout the year came from carbohydrates. We could put it that way. He was the first Mr. Olympia to do that. 55% of his diet, according to most of his writings, was carbohydrates. That's amazing. And he grew, and then he still got peeled to the bone eating carbohydrates as well. So, Dorian, number 2. And my number 1, drum roll, drum roll, drum roll, drum roll. My number 1, the king, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Nobody has influenced generation after generation of young bodybuilders, older bodybuilders, current bodybuilders, professional bodybuilders, contemporary bodybuilders, drug bodybuilders, natural bodybuilders. Arnold influenced everybody. Everybody. His charismatic personality carried him, along with his amazing physique, to become the best bodybuilder in the world. All throughout the 70s, he dominated, straight up until 1975 and 1970 to 75. He was amazing, and his personality carried the day, along with that insistence of this is how you train. He said it so many times. And talk about influence. He was in mainstream. He was the guy now. Understand, Dorian did not get out there in the mainstream. He had bodybuilding magazines still promoting him, but yet it was worldwide. In third, he was in second place. Third place, Lou Ferrigno. He had TV coverage, but nobody stepped up in front of a camera more often than Arnold Schwarzenegger. Nobody was a guest on talk shows and could handle themselves and not embarrass themselves as muscle-bound freaks, which is what they would try to portray bodybuilders as. Nobody can handle themselves like Arnold did. It was a given. With that personality, that dynamic personality, that propelled him to not only become the greatest bodybuilder of all time and promote his ideas on training and diet the entire time and influence how bodybuilders trained all from the 70s on. Prior to that, training the full body a few times a week was the standard of the day for a lot of bodybuilders still. They did not train, 6 days a week on splits, on a three-way split like Arnold promoted. But once he came along, of course, that popularity just blew it up. And so he also had all of this exposure. The Merv Griffin show, the Phil Donahue show. He was on every single talk show you could imagine. Guest spots on TV shows. He was in the movies all of a sudden. Kaboom. And that went worldwide. He was the highest paid actor at one point. Male actor. Action hero. $20 million a film. And not only that, he didn't stop there. He goes, and his big thing, he becomes the governor of the state of California. He would have gone on to become president if it weren't for the fact that he wasn't naturally born here in the United States, which is a requirement in the United States to become president of the United States. But he went as far as he could politically. Not only that, he goes on back to acting now in an older, more mature fashion, and is, of course, trying to do what he does. But Arnold, numero uno, having influenced the majority, the coolest black and white pictures in all those muscle builder magazines from the time, the coolest training pictures. Everybody wanted to be Arnold. He was free. He was free up here. He could play mind games with other people. He seemed to have no hang-ups whatsoever. Everybody wanted to be Arnold. That's the thing. Everybody wanted to be him. So, those are my top 5. With Arnold being numero uno. Hit me down below with your comments. Let me know who you see as your top 5 most influential bodybuilders of all time and your reasons why. So, that's it for today. From my heart to you, John Hart, Mr. America Hart. Thank you for visiting. Off to my left, you're about to see a disc pop up. That is the subscribe button for my channel. If you're liking the videos that I do, please give that a tap. Down below, you're going to see a thumbs up over there. Please give that thumbs up a tap till it turns blue as well. That lets YouTube know how much you're liking the videos, and it'll promote them a little bit more. That's it for today. See you next time.